So I'm Chris Teolis. I work for Mott MacDonald. I'm the digital advisory lead for Canada. I only joined Mott MacDonald a year ago, though I said at the beginning I've been in the industry for 15 years. Half of that time in planning and modeling, and the other half in operations and maintenance. I mentioned before I'm coming over from Heathrow Airport, so I was working at Heathrow Airport for the past 8 years. And I was embedded in the operation there. I brought in, or I helped bring in Terminal 2 and Terminal 3 integrated baggage facility into operation. Lots of lessons learned on those two big projects. I'm thankful to say that I wasn't involved in the T5 opening. That didn't go very well. That was before my time. I'm also a member of the Building Transformations, Digitization, and Data think tank, and that's kind of why I'm here today. So, Mott MacDonald, I don't know if it's a household name here in Canada. We've got 16,000 people worldwide, but only 250 or thereabouts in Canada. So Mott MacDonald is a global engineering management and consultancy, development consultancy. Work in 135 countries from 170 offices worldwide. For over 150 years, we've been turning obstacles into sustainable solutions and finding opportunities in complexity. We're driven to improve society by considering social outcomes in everything that we do, and we're relentlessly focused on excellence and digital innovation. We have a 14-year history in delivering digital on major infrastructure projects and programs, and here are some of our biggest and boldest. From our early days on Victoria Station Upgrade through Crossrail and present-day Ontario Line and the NHS New Hospital Program, a lot of lessons learned over that time, and at the same time, working collaboratively with the UK government on their journey to advance infrastructure delivery in the UK. And I think this timeline shows, so this is the kind of work that we've collaborated with the UK government. And this timeline really shows the incremental change that's occurred in the UK, you know, year after year after year. It's not a quick fix, it's sort of a long grind. And the Centre for Digital About Britain, established in 2017, has been a really important driving force in the UK. And if you haven't visited the website, the material that they've produced, I highly recommend doing that. Lots of really good information there. And since 2018, we've worked with the Infrastructure Client Group to measure the digital maturity of the industry. So this is kind of their benchmark. This is what they're trying to change throughout their initiatives. The Infrastructure Client Group is a group of asset owners which together own over 800 billion Canadian dollars in assets, and they own 40% of the UK's infrastructure construction pipeline. The Digital Maturity Survey is available free of charge for anybody who wants to measure their own maturity and benchmark against this group and others. There's a link provided in the bottom corner, so you can, if you don't have time to copy it down, you can check it out on the YouTube after. So, my presentation here today, I'll begin to talk about some of the pain points, highlight why change is needed. I'll introduce an ambitious solution to those pain points, give us something to aim for, and then I'll focus on some of the concepts, the most important ones, and things that we can apply on projects today. I'll also have a small case study, small steps, and then some final thoughts. So it's probably unfair to say that the procurement strategies and contracts used to deliver infrastructure are failing us as an industry. But when we look at the numbers, we can definitely say that there's room for improvement. Nearly half of our projects are delivered late and or are over budget. And we've only achieved a 1% annual productivity growth over the last 20 years, which suggests we're failing to innovate. Manufacturing, in comparison, has seen nearly 4% annual productivity growth over the same period. And the results of poor performance are typically legal disputes, with the top disputes pointing to a lack of performance visibility and clarity in contracts, as well as a lack of communications around changes. How much are we willing to invest upfront in terms of time and money to tackle these challenges? So here's the ambitious solution, Project 13. It's an industry-led movement to improve the way infrastructure is delivered. It's based on 5 core principles that enable a new operating model for enterprise working. The vast potential of Project 13 lies in promoting supply chain integration, enabling smart, collaborative working practices, and aligning commercial arrangements and incentives with customers and end user outcomes. It emphasizes the need to recognize infrastructure as an information-based industry. Project 13 aims to deliver greater certainty, productivity, performance, and value in delivery and operation, and a more sustainable, innovative, highly skilled industry. It starts with the capable owner, we've talked a lot about that today, who owns both the assets and, importantly, the end user outcomes. So these are the end users of those assets. The transactional relationships based on outputs and lowest price that owners currently rely on, I can't remember if it was Dan or Aaron talked about that a few times, rarely produce the best outcomes or value for money. Instead, the capable owner clearly translates customer outcomes to requirements and targets. I know that was covered in Aaron and Geraldine's talk, and embeds their operational teams in the project teams. They build trust and relationship-based contracts with their partner ecosystems, which is aligned around well-defined value and outcomes. A shift in governance is the cornerstone of Project 13. It's a move to align commercial arrangements and incentives with end-user outcomes and whole life costs. The key to achieving this is the establishment of long-term relationships or strategic partnerships between the owner and their partner ecosystem, and a shared commitment to continuous improvement. The organization of the partner ecosystem is not the function of traditional procurement decisions. Like individuals and teams working together in a business, the partners and suppliers are organized around a common vision, purpose, objectives to deliver the desired outcomes, and everyone is rewarded on the overall performance. Oops. It's not suggested that this is easy, and Project 13 outlines the role of the integrator, who brings together the capabilities and plays a leadership role in creating an effective team. In addition to program management, a key component of integration is information management, which leads to the final pillar of digital transformation. Digital transformation, recognized in both digital delivery and smart infrastructure, is highlighted as a necessity to realize the full benefits. Project 13 embraces the information value chain that connects data to outcomes and identifies decisions as the key value-adding step in between. So here's a representation of the information value chain. We have outcomes at the top, data at the bottom, and in between we have data integration, sense-making, and decision-making. And in order to make better decisions, we need the information organized and presented in a way in which we can make sense of it, and importantly, access it when we need it. Big topic that was covered in the last presentation. This can come in the form of dashboards and reports, information deliverables like documents, models, et cetera, et cetera. The information is assembled from different types of data, which comes from different sources, and the integration layer pulls it all together. It's not just a technology platform, but information management processes and data models. Again, common theme for today. In the case of digital project delivery, an owner can define the information value chain using project information requirements and exchange information requirements as defined in ISO 19650. Talked about those as well today. So let's see how this plays out in a project. So this diagram is from PAS 1192, mentioned in our initial conversation. It was the precursor to ISO 19650, and it does a good job of showing some of the concepts without getting into the detail. So I'm going to try to keep this kind of high level. And drawing your attention to kind of the big box along the bottom, which talks through the decision points. So it can be really helpful to think of a project as a series of decisions, especially in the context of delivering outcomes through digital project delivery. We also have the associated information deliverables, which will be different depending on the procurement model. So the more the owner wants to be involved in the decision making, the more project information requirements they should have. Mentioned a few times today already, it's important to consider the order in which decisions need to be made by both the owner and the suppliers, and who's best to provide that information, and whether or not they're under contract at the time, at the appropriate time, and as well as the level of detail provided in that information. When considering things like modern methods of construction, early supply chain involvement is really important, and that will obviously influence when your decisions are made and who's on board. Something else that was talked about earlier today, requiring too much detail too early or defining detail where it's not necessary at all. All this is to say it's really important to plan as much as you can before beginning your procurement and to document all of that in your EIR, which we talked about before. So moving back up to kind of the top of the diagram here. So we're beginning procurement, and we have our outcomes and requirements defined, and then we go out to market. Aaron and Geraldine talked about this as well. So you ask all your proponents to develop your execution plan. We talked about your project execution plan, your BIM execution plan. You ask them to complete this during procurement to demonstrate how they're going to respond to your information requirements. You can use these plans to assess their capability and capacity, and also how clearly you've defined your outcomes and your requirements. Before mobilization, you can make sure that you have your information deliverables defined in a master information delivery plan, and this you can reference in your contracting documents. Throughout the project, you're gathering lots of information, documentation, non-graphical data, and graphical modeling data. So we've talked mostly about the graphical model, but we've also mentioned a few times the other information and the importance of that. And ideally, this is all stored in a client-owned CDE to facilitate sharing and collaboration. I'm only aware of one legal challenge or legal dispute related to the ownership of a CDE. And in this situation, one of the members in the supply chain owned and operated the CDE and cut off access to the rest of the project teams because of a pay dispute. It's really important in that project obviously ground to a halt because of that. So it's really important that the CDE is owner-owned, client-owned. So let's try to bring this to life in a case study. So I have a case study here which highlights some of the similar steps that you can take to set up a successful digital delivery project. So this was part of a transit agency's system-wide step-free access program. A digital delivery project was initiated for a single station step-free upgrade. The pilot was broken into 3 phases: discovery, development, and implementation, which aligned to procurement, mobilization, and the delivery of the project. During discovery, they defined the requirements and specific objectives in response to the commonly identified issues experienced on past station upgrades. So this is about being specific as to why they were doing digital and what problems that they were trying to solve by implementing the new approach. They assessed the supply chain maturity in digital delivery and established data-driven KPIs. During development, they created a client-owned CDE and associated processes to support the information sharing and a progressive assurance approach. I think somebody else talked about that. I think it was Dan. Rolled out training to upskill the entire project team based on maturity assessment. So this is one of the things. It's not necessarily about saying, we're not going to choose this supplier because they have a low maturity, but it's understanding how much training might be involved, understanding what you're procuring. And then during delivery, they clearly defined roles and responsibilities, established and maintained support from project leadership, really important project leadership support, and provided reporting dashboards to ensure that everybody had visibility on the project. So the result of these small steps, in addition to the legacy defined up on the slide, was that it was the only step-free access upgrade that was delivered on time and on budget. of the dozens that were done. And the acceptance of the construction documents was only 5 days, compared to 14 weeks on average for the other ones. And that was the progressive assurance that was supported by the digital delivery. So to echo kind of, I guess, what Brittany mentioned in her presentation, the successful digital delivery is not just throwing technology and data at a project. A major factor of success in this project was the business change and the change in people's attitudes and ways of working. So, the capital delivery stage only represents a tiny portion of an asset's life. We've got, months versus years. The diagram up here represents the potential value generated during digital delivery using information management processes in green versus traditional processes in blue. The point is that without good information management throughout the project, each time the project enters a new phase, there's a drop in productivity. And Dan talked a lot about that in his presentation today, the redoing of work. When the asset's handed over to operations, what legacy will be left? How do we ensure we maximize the value? So contract documents, the key is the capable owner who embeds operational staff in the project team and can define the information about the assets that is required at handover. Common theme for today, over and over and over again. Contract documents need to include not just the asset information, but how that information should be optimized for handover and opening day. Harping back to the data model and actually making that data usable. Giving us everything is not a responsible position for an owner to take. We hear that a lot, and I'm guilty of it myself. When at Heathrow, it was sort of give us everything, but at that point we didn't know what we needed, and that's an easy kind of default position to be on, but it's not helpful. And I guess while I'm on the topic of information handover, I think it's probably a good opportunity to talk about ownership of data, and to kind of take this opportunity to advocate for a shared data ownership model or position, whereby each author maintains ownership of their own work as well as the asset owner. There are, of course, exceptions to every rule, but I think the default should be open as much as possible. Contracts stating that IP generated during the project becomes the sole property of the appointing party are not helpful and are counter to innovation. Sharing data and information is one of the best ways to develop as an industry, and I think it's really important that our contracting documents don't get in the way of that. So for anyone struggling to define the benefits of digital delivery, maybe they can't get leadership to buy in or are struggling to have that conversation within their organizations, there's a great paper published by the Center for Digital Built Britain, which quantifies the benefits of BIM and information management. And these are just some of the top 3 statistics that I pulled out. But they speak for themselves. So a 7.4% return on investment for direct costs, 40% reduction in unbudgeted changes, and a 9.2% cost savings for asset owners. And these are from real projects, real figures, real projects, and they are achievable. The paper is called The Value of Information Management in the Construction and Infrastructure Sector, so you can check that out. So I'm going to conclude here with 5 points. So outcomes and requirements are so important. Invest up front and get these right and reference them in the contracting documents. Digital maturity. Before getting into contract, know what you're getting into. Be able to assess the digital maturity of yourself as an owner, as well as your supply chain and your contractors. Information for decision making. Again, invest up front. Think about the sequence of decisions and who's responsible for them based on your procurement model. Plan them out and ensure the right information is there when you need it. Business change. People and the process elements, so important, as well as buy-in from senior leadership, and being able to train, upskill, and educate. And finally, operations and maintenance. So the owner's best place to get this right, embed operational staff in your project teams. I was just having a conversation outside before this about what we were doing at Heathrow. And at Heathrow, what we were doing is we're getting the project to finance people from the operation moving into the project team. So the project was backfilling the operational role with a consultant or with overtime. And we were getting the project to fund that so that the operational teams, the FM teams, aren't doing it as a second job or doing it on top of what their day job was. It was getting them out of the operation and being able to focus solely on a big project. So that's all I've got, and I can open it up for questions. Thanks very much.